Hi Year 9, I am just recording you a short video about the symmetrical family. Um, and we're really going to be investigating what is the symmetrical family. So hopefully by the end of this you'll have a detailed definition of what is the symmetrical family. And you can kind of have a guess of what we're going to be talking about today, because you probably understand what the definition of symmetrical is. And you would be right in thinking that this relates to more equality within the family, so a greater sharing of the roles within the household between males and females within the household. And really, our starting point is the work of Young and Wilmot, who published this seminal text, The Symmetrical Family, in 1973. And this text, in their findings, suggested that the symmetrical family had become the typical family set up in Britain. And what they suggest in their findings is that the roles between men and women were less segregated. Now, we've looked in previous lessons about perhaps more traditional roles of men and women within the household, when we've talked things like about segregated conjugal roles. We've talked about the expressive roles that are perhaps more female dominated. And we've also looked at joint conjugal roles, which goes to which is a term linked to greater sharing of roles within the family. So I suppose the symmetrical family links in quite nicely with that definition that we looked at and the discussions we had in our last lesson together. So one key finding by Wilmot and Young is that the roles of the husband and wife were less segregated or separate than they had been in the past. Whilst some segregation still did exist within the symmetrical family, they suggest that the relationship is opposite but similar. So while men and women may carry out different tasks within the family, they spent an equal amount of time on. So you can see here that, and I've put some images up here, that although women mostly looked after the housework and the childcare, men spent a lot of time within the house doing DIY tasks, for example. Other characteristics of the symmetrical family is a financial partnership between the husband and wife. So there is greater decision making, including decisions on how money is spent, is become a much more shared activity. Another characteristic that husband and wife are more home centered than in the past. For example, there's a growing interest in DIY. And family members also spend much more of their leisure time together, therefore making relationships between husband, wife, and children more caring and loving. Again, I think this rings true of what our definition of joint conjugal roles and relationships are, which we studied in our last lesson. So, sets the symmetrical family and joint conjugal roles, that you can draw a lot of similarities between them all. So Young and Wilmot, to summarise, suggest that families as a whole have become much more home-centred, and they argue, that there is greater equality between men and women within the household. And actually, even though their tasks are different, they spend equally the same amount of time on each of them. For example, men may women may do more of the housework and childcare, but men also spend the same amount of time on home-related tasks as well. So why has there been a move towards the symmetrical family? And you can guess from the image that I have put up here that one of the major reasons for the explanation of the rise in the symmetrical family is the move towards gender equality, and that is obviously has been perpetuated or encouraged by the rise of feminism since the 1960s. And this has had a great impact on gender roles. Feminists fought for equal rights. We've already covered this before, and if you've done history as well, which you all did in Year 8, in Year 7, you would have covered about the suffragette movement and their fight for the women's vote in the earlier 20th century. And we have discussed feminism in the latter part of the 20th century, in the 60s. So feminists fought for equal rights for women and men, and feminism has influenced many women's attitudes and has led them to reject traditional housewife roles. More effective contraception has meant that women have had fewer children, and families can now be planned. So women can both follow a career and can be a mother at the same time. And many women today are now financially independent and have more freedom, equality, both inside and outside the home. Now, this I am generalising, and I think if we were in class together, we could go into this in more greater depth, because I think it's quite a generalisation of why we have moved towards the symmetrical family. But at this moment in time, as I can't be with you in front of the class, I think this is what you need to know for the exam, that we've moved towards, or one of the explanations of a move towards symmetrical family is because of the rise of feminism in the 1960s, which has taught women or expressed to women that they too can be independent financially and can go to work and earn a living and don't only have to be a housewife. And also the introduction of contraception has meant that women have more control over their bodies and when they decide or don't decide to have children. But what do feminists say about the move to the symmetrical family? So feminists reject the idea of the symmetrical family. They argue that gender differences still exist, and some argue that men's involvement in housework has not increased as much as women's involvement in paid employment. Anne Oakley in 1974 argued, highlight Anne Oakley, have this written in your notes somewhere, found that women in paid employment still do the majority of the housework. This can lead to the idea that women undertake a triple shift. So not only do women go out and do their paid work in employment, but when they come home, they also do the housework, and they also have to do the third shift, which is the emotional work, the role of being a mum, putting the children to bed, listening to to any problems that the child might have, packing the bags, packing the lunches, ready for the next day. Okay, so this is the idea of the triple shift. So actually, feminists argue that there is no equality within the family. That this is false, basically. And finally, in my last slide here, so another reason why we have moved towards the symmetrical family. So another reason why we have moved towards the symmetrical family is perhaps the work by Gatrell in 2008 here, who researched the role of fathers within the family, and he found that actually men are playing a greater role as fathers than they ever did before in the past. And in some cases, this is because men had fathers who were not involved in their upbringing, so they wanted to do things differently for their own family. However, this new role has caused tension between couples because women, again, I think in the previous slides, I think this is maybe what I was talking about in terms of generalization, is that not all women want to have the maternal role taken away from them. And perhaps in Gatterall's study, they found that some women or did not want their maternal role taken away from them, and felt that men cherry picked the most rewarding jobs and avoided doing jobs within the household, such as ironing or housework. So women often felt that if men wanted to divide parenting time more equally, they then should also be expected to divide housework more equally as well. So I hope that explains a little bit about the symmetrical family. So the symmetrical family is the argument by Wilmer and Young that the families have become more equal, households become more equal, and there's equal sharing of tasks between men and women. Okay, this move has happened because of the feminist movement and because of men wanting to take a greater role of parenting within the household. However, feminists would argue that this is not, in fact, true, and that women are actually doing what's called a triple shift within the house. So I hope that explains a little bit of what the symmetrical family is.